All right, so the second part of this course, we should be pretty familiar with common HTML elements, but the second part focuses on positioning them in our website and getting our website to be presented in a layout that is much more appealing as opposed to the default layouts we have right now, because everything feels pretty rigid. Things kind of go where they want to go, and it seems pretty hard to move them around. And so we're going to explore some avenues in terms of tackling that issue and making more pretty websites, because that is ultimately the goal at the end of the day. Let's start simple. Here's an image and here's some text. Nothing crazy. However, I know that an image is an inline element and a paragraph is a block element. So this image only takes up that much space on my website. However, when I go to add a paragraph element, it is a block element, so it says put me on a new line and span me across the entire width of the web page. And as you can see, that's exactly what it does. What if I wanted to combine these two? Because I've got all this free real estate here. I've got all this empty space that isn't technically being taken up by anything. This image does not span the entire web page. It just spans that much space. So that's where we introduce the float property. So in my HTML code, this is just my image. This is my paragraph. The float property works like this. My image, which is being selected by the ID block, I can specify its float property, and by default it's none. However, I can change this float property to pretty much one of three things. None is default, and then left and right. So sometimes it's best to just show you what these properties do as I try to explain them. So if I float to the left, what does that mean for this image? What's going to happen to this element? Well, what happens is it lets every other element on your web page float beside it. And I know you shouldn't use the name of a word in its own description, so maybe I can think of another one. All of this text wraps around this image. So the float property pretty much docks it to the left, so it's stuck onto the left of my web page, and it allows the text to wrap around it. So instead of it occupying all that space, which it doesn't really do, it lets the text, it basically lets it intertwine with the other element, the other paragraph element. So that's cool. And I can add another paragraph element. And where do you think this paragraph element will end up? Will it end up below the picture, or will it end up floating to the left of that image, or floating to the right, I should say? Well, here's some more text. I'm going to add it to my website. And you can see that this text is also put up here. This image is allowing every element I add to my web page to float beside it. What if I didn't want it to float? What if I had some lore here about my Minecraft block, and what if I am ready to move on to another section of my website? In other words, I don't want this to look like it's attached up here. I want to start a new line. Well, then we pair it with the clear. My goodness. The clear property. All right. So how do we use the clear property? Well, if I want this text to basically not be affected by the floating of this image or this element, what I can do is I can use the clear property. And actually I'm going to do it here. You don't have to, but I'm going to do it here. I'm going to add a style to this paragraph element. Clear it is the property. And once again, we've got both left, right, none. Typically, we're using both with the clear property. Just like that. So I could have just as easily given this paragraph element an ID, and maybe I should have done that. Maybe I should have, ASDF, whatever. And I could have went in here and I could have said, all right, I'm going to stylize ASDF, and I'm going to set the clear property to be both. I could have done that, but I didn't. I went old school. I stylized right inside. Inline styling is what they call that. Okay, what does this do? What does this clear property do? Well, if I hit Control S to save, now it moves down on a new line. It basically, the clear property says, all right, you've got a floating element above you, but I'm here to put a stop to that. And if I have my clear property set to both, we're not floating anymore. And anything we add after me, we're done with the floating. We're gonna structure ourselves like normal. So there's some more text. It's not going up there. It's going normal. It's going normal. Here's some more text. It's going normal. If I didn't have this clear property to basically reset and be like, all right, we're done with the floating. If I get rid of that, that paragraph element, is going right back up to there. And these paragraph elements are going down here because finally we've used up all the space that we can. And there's no more room in this block for these text elements to go. So maybe that's a little confusing. Maybe we should just rewind here. So if you're ever floating, you use the clear property, set it to both to basically say, okay, we're moving on. We're moving on with the rest of the page. Couple things. The clear property is a block property, which means it only works on block elements. What does that mean? Well, if you're not working with a block element, you're in a bit of trouble. Give me an inline element. An image? Okay, perfect. Images are inlines. I've got another image in my website. Who would have thought? Oops, sorry. Here is my image. Now I have my style set up, so I'm just going to give it a ID because I already set that up. All right, there's my image. So my first image, it's being floated to the left, which means everything, including paragraphs and other elements such as pictures, are gonna go beside it where the next available space is. What if I didn't want it there? What if I wanted this image on a new line? What if I was done? Well, you would say, we just talked about the float, the clear property. Oh my goodness. And the clear property says, all right, we're done with floating. We're moving on with our life. So why can't we do that here? Well, if I go style equals clear, set it to both, what happens? Nothing happens because an image is an inline element and clear only works for block elements. So what do? Well, couple things. You could put the image inside a div and clear the div. You could also change the display property of this inline element so that it behaves as a block element. Boom. And now it gets slapped on a new line. Now the clear property actually works. And that's what the clear property does. It says, okay, we're done floating. Move on with your life. Go on the next line. And if I add a paragraph element, that should go right under it. And it does. One last thing. You can see that this text is pretty much touching. Well, it is touching the image. And I've seen some of you guys use this property before, which is pretty cool. I don't know if I've talked about it. My block image, I can set its margin. And margin basically says, okay, I need this much space between me and the next element. You can specify margin all around your shape, or you can specify, hey, I just want some space to the right of this image. So if I go margin right, I can say, you know what, this image, I need some space. I need 20 pixels of space between me and the next element. And there it kind of pushes that text away in a sense. So you can see nice uniform space, just a little bit easier to read. And we get that margin, that gap. So a cool, nifty little property to know. All right, I think that's it.